thank you, Luis, and everybody else for this wonderful invitation. It's a pleasure to be meeting with you in Portland. I am coming from Caracas, Venezuela. I am currently living here, so I have the responsibilities here of being Vice Foreign Minister for North American Relations. And I'm also president of the Simon Bolivar Institute for Peace and Solidarity. And I welcome this opportunity to talk a little bit about Venezuela. And of course, I would love to, have a discussion with you as well as to your takes on or any questions you may have on the political process here. But what I would want to, the way I would like to start just simply by saying that, going back a little bit in the history of Venezuela and its revolutionary process, I think, it was probably the first attempt at 21st century socialism that we underwent in this region, in this continent. Venezuela is probably the first popular outburst against neoliberalism in Latin America, while the rest of the world was facing the fall of the Berlin Wall. There was already an attempt to rise up against neoliberalism here in Caracas in 1989, where a lot of people just basically took to the streets to protest what was clearly, Washington Consensus's plan for Venezuela, privatizations, and cuts in public spending, and all the other things that we already know are part of the neoliberal model. Now, it was at a time where everybody thought that that was it, and that was the victory of the Cold War, and there will be no longer any alternatives. And like Fukuyama said, it was the end of history, and there was no more room for ideology. But something was happening here, and I think in 1989 we didn't quite know what was happening, but eventually it turned into a strong political movement, which later took under the leadership of President Chavez, or Hugo Chavez at the moment before he became president, who basically came back and started questioning not only the neoliberal policies, but also how society was accepting these policies. So he began to go back into Venezuelan history, into Venezuelan identity, into popular organization, and basically what he was calling for and what people understood and came out for of his message was that the response to neoliberalism had to be going back to our own roots, going back to our own history, going back to popular engagement and popular community and organization. That was the response that we could do in face of this model that was being imposed on us. Some people may think that Venezuela was an unlikely setting for this type of uprising because it had been a democracy, a stable democracy in the liberal terms, for over 40 years, and it was a close ally of the United States. It was a high-income country living basically of oil production. But that I think that is actually why it became the spot where inequality was deepening and where social exclusion was deepening, because that's what the neoliberal model does. So the Bolivarian Revolution basically starts with a rebellion, a military rebellion in '92, which is when Chavez first appears. And again, there was questioning as with a military rebellion if this meant that there was a dictatorship that was going to be installed. But then you realize that it had nothing to do with those types of military uprisings that we had seen historically in Latin America, which were mostly right-wing in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. It was actually it was a popular response from the military, who had refused basically to repress and to attack people back in 1989. Fast forwarding a little bit, Chavez goes to jail, but then is pardoned for this military rebellion, and becomes so popular that he wins the election in 1998 and becomes president. And the first thing he does is call on the population to support a constituent assembly, basically to redraw the country's constitution and basically redraw the country's roadmap. Now, for 20 years now, this is what we've been building. It's what we've called the Bolivarian Revolution. But basically, if I have to pinpoint some of the important things about this political process, I would have to say that first, it was taking back our own identity, going back to our roots, going back to Bolivar, going back to other important people in our Latin American tradition. There were also, I think, a very important reform with regards to media and media access, and the definition of who had media concessions and for how long, and why should the media only be in the hands of these private enterprises and not other possibilities. And here in Venezuela, we created possibilities such as community television stations, state-owned television stations, and things that would open basically the source of information for the people, and not only to corporate media. I think another very key aspect of the Bolivarian Revolution was reasserting Venezuela's rights to its own natural resources. There was a process of renationalization of oil, and where we basically sat down with different companies and said, okay, you can extract oil from Venezuela, but we need to rearrange the way we split the profits. And Venezuela, as owner, has to get over 50% of these transactions. And some companies didn't like it and left, and began a war against Venezuela in this sense. For example, ExxonMobil being one of the companies that was against this process. But in the end, what this allowed for was to increase Venezuela's income, and that income could be used for the social programs that nobody had put into place earlier before. So that social exclusion, that big weight that we were carrying as a country, with about 70% of people in poverty, that became addressed for the first time. And then that became addressed by installing social programs, in helping people literacy, having access for the first time to basic health care, making sure that education that was nominally free, it could also be of some sort of better quality, that we would have access to housing. So all these programs started coming forth from the reassertion of Venezuela's rights over its production and its natural resources. Another point that I think is key in this or in the Venezuelan process was taking a look into our region, into South America or Latin America and the Caribbean in general as our own natural space, and trying to promote integration and trying to promote spaces of cooperation between our countries. Some of these spaces, for example, ALBA, where we're with countries such as Nicaragua and Cuba and other countries in the Caribbean as well, and Bolivia. Well, this space became a space of true cooperation, and one of the results that I could quickly name is that the eradication of illiteracy happened not only in Venezuela, but in Bolivia, Ecuador, Nicaragua, and all these other countries, through programs that were launched from ALBA as a multilateral space. So, a lot of people say, well, there's what people are looking for, numbers of big transactions and commercial transactions, but they don't see the power that making people read can have for a nation, and how strong that really is for us. Finally, I have to say that the most important of all things here in this process, it is profoundly democratic. Of course, this is not, none of this is what you'll hear in the media, but this process was profoundly democratic since the beginning, when we all worked towards the creation of our 1999 Constitution, and we have become not only a representative democracy where you could just go and represent, you know, like your leader for Congress and they'll represent you, but we become a participatory democracy where big questions of the country are asked of the people, and people participate in those decisions, and where people have become the actual subjects of the transformation. For example, the housing project here in Venezuela is something that takes place with community organizing, where the community participates and shares a responsibility and shares action with the state that's giving out the funding and the support for housing to be built, for public housing to be built. And at the end, you know, you have projects that are built by the people that would later live in those projects. And in a way, people become part of their own democracy. We have a take on human rights, where we believe that human rights are not only political rights, and it's not only voting, and it's not only freedom of expression, but also if we really want to talk about human rights, we have to consider rights to housing, rights to healthcare, rights to education, as we think all socialist countries and governments must do. This of course gained for us a huge animosity by the United States and by the right wing in Venezuela, the people that had privileges for many years here in Venezuela. And as you can imagine, with the majority of the media being controlled by the opposition, by the right wing, you know, we have been under years and years of constant demonization of the Venezuelan process, of constant distortions of what is going on here, in the same way that has happened with Cuba, that has been with any other of the countries that have chosen socialism as the way to move forward. And since we became this disruptive factor in Latin America, well, you know, the United States couldn't accept to have another Cuba, or to have another country that would go so far away from its foreign policy. So they began this very vicious attack against Venezuela. We had a coup attempt in 2002 that tried to overthrow President Chavez, and we then, about a few months later, we had basically a stoppage of the oil company in an attempt to force again economic crisis that would put President Chavez out of office. President Chavez dies in 2013, and then President Maduro becomes president, is elected president in 2013, and now it coincides with the fall of oil prices in markets and with other external factors that basically have seriously affected Venezuelan economy. So since then, we have faced a lot of challenges. Then came Trump into office with basically, a whole group of people that were somehow lost back in the Cold War, and believed that they had the mission of destroying communism throughout the world, and that they needed to start with Latin America. And you had the Boltons and the Pompeos and all the type of that type of people basically start an aggression against Venezuela, where we are one of the countries that is under the most vicious sanctions and blockades of the United States currently. And that's and that hasn't changed with the Biden administration. I mean, no new sanctions have put into place, but we're still struggling against them. So in a very quick attempt to try to summarize what's going on here, that's sort of where we stand. And I would just say, this is the Venezuelan people, we are a people that we want to live in peace with the rest of the world, and we believe that we have the ability of building a more just society under Bolivarian socialism. If you have any questions, I'm open.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Carlos. Okay, so now's time. If you would like to get on stack to ask Carlos a question, please do so, and please keep your question short. No comments instead of questions, please. Jesse, go ahead.
Thank you, Minister. I'm curious, as you are aware, based on the kind of opening part of our discussion here today, there is a strike going on at the Mondelez facility in Northeast Portland, and recently they sent a message of solidarity to the Venezuelan workers at the Barquisimeto facility in northeastern Venezuela. I was wondering if there is anything that the government intends to do to, potentially help support this strike, which might be going into an international work stoppage at any point in the future, which would just be great and a major blow against American capital. Thank you.
Look, we're very supportive of workers' movements throughout the world, and I know our workers are also very, very connected to struggles throughout. I don't know of any specific action plan that is in place, but I'm sure that if there's something that we can do to contribute and to call out the attention of the workers' plight here or everywhere around the world, we'll be sure to do it. And I'll personally be following up on that.
Chris, go ahead.
Hi, Carlos. Thanks so much for coming and talking with us. I have a question about, the media politics of Venezuela here. And I have a perception that a piece of why it is the way that it is that because Venezuela is comparatively wealthy within Latin America, that there's a larger proportion of the population who look like the people the New York Times wants to have as its readership, kind of upper middle class educated North Americans, and which would be different, say, from Nicaragua, where, we were seeing, or El Salvador, the sort of super wealthy oligarchs and a much, an even larger proportion of really immiserated people. We have immiserated people in the United States, but they're probably under 25%. I'm guessing in Venezuela it might be 50 or 60%. I don't know, but I'm just curious if that makes sense to you about part of the kind of cultural politics of the demonization of Venezuela.
No, for sure, and I think that's one of the issues, that because we were so close to the United States in the sense that we became a wealthy country because of oil exploitation, and because there's a lot of presence here of U.S. companies and the U.S. lifestyle. So a lot of the Venezuelan bourgeoisie basically adopted, a lot of that style, and you could see it today. I mean, you can see Venezuelan American activism is very close to what Cuban American activism was in the past. Picking up on this, it's a very different type of activism as for other Latino migrants, for example, that that cross the border and they're working class and they have the struggle. These are wealthy people. A lot of people left with some fortunes from Venezuela and took them to Florida, and they even financed some of the media outlets that you'll get some of the news from. So there is an important part of the Venezuelan bourgeoisie that is, of course, rancorous of us, because we basically stop all the privileges and stop the exclusive life they had here, and we opened up that to the access for the majority of people. Again, like we said, losing, what creates hatred is not gaining rights, it's losing privileges, and then this is the problem that these people have.
Great, thank you. Let's go to Conrad.
Hey, thanks so much for talking to us. So my question is, in the second international era of international socialism, it was more or less taken for granted that for socialism to be a reality in countries in Latin America, countries in Asia, even countries in Africa already at that point in time, that there would have to be socialist transformation in places like the United States, Japan, Germany, industrial superpowers, basically. So I guess, obviously Venezuela is having a lot of problems because of the way it gets sort of, subjugated by the United States. So I'm wondering how you guys view that issue of kind of international socialist transformation, and how it relates to your project at home. Thanks.
Well, definitely. I think we all have different types of socialism, in the sense that I think socialism is something that has to be, for it to be real, it has to be adapted to our own characteristics. And that is true of Venezuela, as is true of the United States, and as is true everywhere else. The way we're trying to build here is social policies from the state that can guarantee those rights and can bring people out of that exclusion that we've had for so long, that we've historically had. Our method, of course, is going to find contradictions, and it's going to find difficulties, because we are inserted into a world capitalist society in a way that is very difficult for us to overcome, because we're mainly oil producers. So there's issues there. I mean, there's an environmental issue there. There's that we are aware of, but that the way the distribution of labor, international distribution of labor, assigned Venezuela the job of producing oil, well, now is a challenge to depart from that and to produce something else, and we've tried. I mean, we're working on that, but it's very difficult to do that, off the start. So we have to deal with those contradictions, and we have to deal with other contradictions that come out of the current struggles that we're in. I mean, we're right now blockaded in a way that we have no access to things that other countries would regularly have access to. I mean, we can't trade with whoever we want. We can't ask for a loan in international banks like everybody else would. So it's a very difficult type of or there's a lot of challenges for Venezuela in that sense. So what I think is, we're trying to do is always maintain the horizon of popular participation, of deep democracy, and of social justice, and try to make sure that everything falls into line with that.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
We, I think, are out of time for questions, unless someone would like to move to extend time. I think we have one other person on stack, but if I don't see a motion to extend, then we'll move on to our next agenda item. Okay, there's been a motion to extend time for questions by 3 minutes. I see a second to that motion. Is there any objection? Okay, seeing no objection, we're going to extend time by 3 minutes. Jesse Joseph is on stack. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us, Minister. It's really great to have you. I guess kind of like dovetailing from that question, I think one of the really cool things about Venezuela under Chavez was like a lot of really cool examples of multilateralism based on solidarity, right? Like ALBA, like Petrocaribe, and I think that's something that like the U.S. left really has to learn from, because the U.S. is a very wealthy nation that has the potential for real multilateralism based on solidarity, if we had the political power to do it. Do you have any advice for us for how to make that a popular demand?
Look, I think I don't like to give advice to people, because I think sometimes that sounds a little pretentious and I think everybody has their own experience and their own realities. I'll tell you what we did, and that might be of interest to you, and maybe that could help. And I think one of the key things, one of the key arguments always in socialism and within the left in Latin America it's always been whether we go into the power issue. I mean, whether we go and dispute elections, whether we participate, or whether we just break away with the system and then just wait for the real transformation to come and so forth. The decision that we made in Venezuela was to go out and take over the system and go in and and use the system to our advantage and force the system, because the more organizations you have, the more popular pressures you have, the more the system can resist. So and that has been our take. So I see that, you know, sometimes in other countries there's a big struggle about being very specific, very pure about ideas and issues, and you know, I think the challenge is really to make sure that you can enter the spaces of power where you can promote real transformation. Otherwise, we end up having, you know, philosophical discussions that don't do anything for the working class, or that don't allow the working class to you know, to achieve goals. We have to start by taking power and moving forward and you know, making that transformation possible. So one of the things I like about DSA in general is that when I see DSA supporting candidates and you know, making sure that they promote people that have the same values, and you know, maybe that leads to that transformation that everybody needs.
Great, thank you so much, Minister. I think that was the last person with a question, and I just want to thank you so much for spending your time with us here today. Loved hearing from you, and hope you'll return to one of our meetings sometime.
Thank you very much, and hope to see you guys visit us sometime soon as well.
Thank you so much.